on our dime. Joni Ernst doesn't have to live high in the hog and expect us to vote for her. And at the same time that she's living high on the hog, demand that Medicare be privatized and Social Security be privatized. Because I'll tell you, that's a 100% loser. And if you have a loved one or you yourself are on Social Security or Medicare, you better take a look at Joni Ernst and her record, because she seems to be talking out of both sides of her mouth. And I've got no time for that whatsoever. I have no time. Now, I know you're grossed out by the Democratic Party. I know you're beyond disgusted with the Democratic Party. They're screaming, they're rioting in the streets, their refusal, even at the local level, to condemn it. I mean, putting Biden at the top of the ticket, who then stays in the basement all summer. I mean, come on. Come on. And Teresa Greenfield, by the way, in another year with a better Republican candidate, we'd beat her. We'd beat Teresa Greenfield 10, 15 percentage points. Right now, I believe Teresa Greenfield's actually a little bit ahead of Joni Ernst. And the reasons are clear. Joni Ernst will not support Social Security or Medicare. As far as I'm concerned, that sinks her. And by the way, I had to call her office for 6 weeks, 2 months, just to get her on the air in Fort Dodge. I called Teresa Greenfield, bang, she was on. Of course, she's the one seeking the office. She's not the incumbent. Randy Feenstra, for example, will not debate J.D. Scholten, which I think is a mistake. But on the other hand, J.D. might bring up that Randy doesn't support Medicare and Social Security. He said on this show that he has. But especially in the 4th District with so many older people, that's a big loser. Trying to privatize Medicare, Social Security, or whatever is a big loser. And if Randy's pushing that, I won't support him. I like him. He's a good guy, and he's a real sharp guy. Randy Feenstra is a real sharp guy. But if he's going to insist on taking the first steps to ruin Medicare and Social Security, I'm going to have to fight him. Ronald Reagan already did that. Ronald Reagan didn't mention Social Security and Medicare when he ran against Jimmy Carter. Of course, Jimmy Carter was such a terrible president. People forget that. The Democrats always want to go for the lowest common denominator, so they get this pious Jimmy Carter, who was the disaster as a president. Ronald Reagan beats him, and what's Ronald Reagan do? He cuts the top rate from 70% to 30%, and then imposes a tax on Social Security to pay for it. Have we really been better off since Reagan lowered the top rate? Have we really seen a reinvestment in jobs in this country? I'll tell you, that's 40 years ago that this happened. And no, we haven't. No, we haven't. There has been no outpouring from big business to make our lives any bigger. You think that's what happens? Oh, yes. Do you think in the top circles of the Republican Party, or the Democratic Party for that matter, they sit around thinking, gosh, how can we make things better for working people? How can we treat them a little bit better? You think that's what they're doing? Hell no. They're talking about taking care of their biggest contributors, because in politics, and I love Ozzie Meyer. Remember Ozzie Meyer? He was a congressman, I think, from Pennsylvania in scandal, late 70s. Democrat from Pennsylvania, I think. I'm speaking right off the top of my head. So if you want to wiki that scandal, by all means do it. I might be a little wrong on that. But Ozzie was caught on tape talking about Washington, D.C. to an FBI agent who was dressed as an Arab sheik, the full dress stuff, you know. And he said, almost looking into the camera, he was actually looking at this FBI agent / sheik, almost looking into the camera. I'll tell you one thing about this town, again, referring to Washington, D.C. I'll tell you one thing about this town. In this town, money walks and money talks and BS walks. Thank you, Oz. I will think of you fondly and forever. So that was the takeaway from Joni Ernst and Teresa Greenfield last night. Kansas City looked brilliant against the Baltimore Ravens. For the first time, Lamar Jackson did not pass for 100 yards. Patrick Mahomes is so athletic. I really believe he's unstoppable. I really think he's unstoppable. He's just got so many skills. He runs, he twists, he dodges. He can throw with accuracy down the field from every position imaginable. This kid is fantastic. He's too young to be considered the greatest of all time, but I'll tell you, he has a few more years under his belt like he's had. And yeah, he's definitely in the running for the greatest quarterback of all time. Don't give me this Brady stuff. Brady had a great career, and he's a great passer and a great quarterback, but he's from another time. He's the classic drop-back quarterback. He's the classic drop-back quarterback. And time for classic drop-back quarterbacks is over. You got to do a lot of other things like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson to be anywhere near what's called a top quarterback in the National Football League. I want to turn your attention, our attention, to the allegations coming out of a football game Friday night that there were racist insults hurled at some Valley players, Southeast Valley players, from South Central Calhoun players. I have talked with a number of people. I talked with the superintendents of both schools this morning. I've tried to talk with the coaches themselves, but they have referred me to the superintendent, and I get that. They want to have one voice speaking for their school. I have spoken with other people in the area that should know about these things. And so far, what I found out is that the sole source for these allegations is a Facebook post by Heather Jondal Fisher. Now, Charles Clayton, strangely, has involved himself in this effort. I don't know what Charles's role is. We talked and argued back and forth on Facebook last night. And he tells me he is a leader in Central Iowa, not a politician. Now, I asked for the distinction, and I haven't got it yet. But Charles will be in not this Thursday, but the following Thursday. And I'll press him on that again because he does owe us an explanation. All of the same, and this seems very convenient to me, frankly, that a situation and a story really as shaky as this has come up just about a month before the election, a little over a month before the election. Charles puts on his Lone Ranger outfit, and he's over in Calhoun County solving the racial problems of the world. Wow, really? Charles is a man of great accomplishment, of great character. I admire him. But despite his protests, he is a political candidate hooked up with a political party who have been known to pull little stunts like this. They have been known, especially the Democrats, have been known to pull little stunts like this. Now, I'm old enough to remember when the Republican Party, when the Republican Party hired a bunch of pregnant black women to picket Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was giving a speech in some building somewhere or some university. And the Republican Party hired these pregnant black women, and they were all like in their 7th or 8th month. And they were all in a circle, walking around carrying big signs that said, "Nixon's the one." Naturally, the Republicans who organized this little debacle thought that the Democrats would be blamed. But thanks to Watergate and things that came out of Watergate, we know more. Yeah, that was one of the funniest, cheapest stunts I've ever heard. Hire a bunch of pregnant black women, give them all signs that say Nixon's the one, and then picket Nixon, just assuming that the Democrats would be blamed. And they were at the time. This was like 1971 or something like that. It wasn't like yesterday. But, of course, Trump was outed in October with that daily access or that all access or whatever it was, when he spoke so crudely about grabbing women in his he was so vulgar that everyone was disgusted. I think Republicans, I hope all Republicans were as disgusted as I was about Trump's remarks. The Democrats certainly made as much as they could, but they had that little audio and tape for a long time. They kept it back and released it just before the election. Now, that's the way it goes. You know, and even with all of that, he still beat Hillary Clinton. That's how, Hillary Clinton's communications director said we didn't realize we were nominating somebody the country hated. That's because you live in a bubble. You live in your little bubble there. And you get into packaging and marketing and you lose the feel for the people in the country or the area that you're trying to persuade to vote for your candidate. Anyway, I digress once again. Sorry. As promised, by the way, I talked with the superintendents of both Southeast Valley and South Central Calhoun this morning, real briefly. I tried to talk with the coaches, but the coaches again referred me to the superintendents. So some people were pushing me to talk with the coaches and superintendents, but the coaches would just refer me to the superintendent. I get that. I got that. The main thing to remember here is, and this is an unusual thing, is so far, and here it is Tuesday afternoon, and the only source that we have for this racist accusation is the person who posted on social media, Heather Jondal Fisher. That's it. That's what we have. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit more today. We're not going to dwell on it. But there's a lot of things going on here. All of a sudden, Charles is involved. And again, all of a sudden, he's a leader and not a political candidate. But sorry, it doesn't work that way. You're running for public office. You surrender a little bit of your privacy when you do that. Especially when you are in the public eye on a sensitive issue like this. The media, all media in our area and in our state has an obligation to look into this. And don't be surprised if Des Moines television stations don't pick up on this story. Don't be surprised. Okay? Just one last thing. Rob Jones, I think, has been a breath of fresh air to this radio station group since the day he walked in the door. I have nothing but respect for him. I think he's the best writer and a serious sports talent that we've seen in Fort Dodge in 40, 50 years. The only guy that could hold a candle to him when it comes to presentation was Jerry Sheeter. Jerry Sheeter, when he was young, had the thunder voice. I mean, he captivated an audience with his presentation, with his news presentation. He could write news, he could deliver news, and he knew where all the bodies were buried in Fort Dodge and in Webster County, believe me. Jerry was extraordinary. Rob is almost his equal in that category. And Jerry, of course, never did sports or anything else that Rob does all the time. Rob is a workaholic. If I ever saw one, I think he's out at these radio stations 7 days a week because he loves it. I respect Rob. I consider him a friend. And if he and I got a little sideways on this and misunderstood each other, hey, I apologize. I look forward to working with Rob on any number of projects in the future. Okay? Are we all good there? Yeah, we'll be back. This is AM 1400, KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge.
Michael Devine, the Doctor of Truth.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to confess?
and to take care of that park to their considerable credit. And they were on board with allowing this water crossing. A number of people were. Apparently, this whole thing was over a couple of people who work over at City Hall didn't like the idea. And of course, when you have a little authority and you have a couple of people's attention, it's hard to let go of that authority because it just feels so good to some people to rub your nose in their authority. But apparently, good triumphed over evil in this particular effort, and Snell Crawford water crossing will be opened. I should have called Dave Flattery, Councilman Flattery, to be on the air today, but I forgot, frankly. Dave's a good guy, and he does a lot of things. I know I wasn't convinced of that Floyd or Rosedale thing that Dave wanted out there on 10th Avenue North right away, but Dave is, in his boundless enthusiasm, convinced me it was the way to go, and I'm glad that he did, and I'm glad that Dave perseveres and thinks of a lot of different ways to make our lives just a little bit better here in Webster County and Fort Dodge, certainly. So way to go, Dave Flattery, and all the people who worked on this effort. Apparently, it was a unanimous vote for the council, which is also a good thing. That maybe that sends a message into the bowels of City Hall that, you know, we're still working here. The ultimate authority is still ours. Yeah, that's always a good thing. I don't know if David Feerick will be in at 4 o'clock today. I should really text Feerick and see what his situation is. But love to have him here, as always. Having Feerick here has allowed me to get rid of most of the city council people. Jeff Halder's back, and I'm glad that Jeff is. Andy never will be back. Kind of have my doubts about Kim. Dave comes when he feels like it, and that's a good thing. Nevin Conrad will show up, even though I'm harsh to Democrats. And Lydia, I don't know if she'll ever be back either. I don't think this is her thing. She's a nice person. But you know, councils come, councils go. We'll see what happens in the future. I had them all here at one time, but I got kind of a deserved reputation as somebody who was cranky. Well, I've had this show for a long time. I think I've had this show almost 12 years. It'll be 12 years in November, I believe. And been through a couple of different incarnations. As far as excellent in broadcast journalism is concerned, as Rush Limbaugh would say, yes, we're here with excellence in broadcast journalism. I don't know. If you hear that chair squeaking, I'm sorry. I always get the squeaky chair in here. And I'm trying to adjust the video camera. By the way, you can see this program audio and video by going to my Facebook page, AM 1400 KVFD, The Voice for Dodge, or Alpha Media website, or my personal Facebook page, Michael Devine. Just Michael Devine. Be better if you just went to my business pages. Again, I don't want anybody to think that I'm at odds with Rob Jones at all. I'm not. He's a great guy. He's a work monster, just a workaholic guy, and it just brings joy and high energy to everything that he does. Yesterday, when we were running news reports that this racial incident, the origins of this alleged racial incident at a football game Friday night between Southeast Valley and South Central Calhoun, the source of that information came from one person on social media. I had to question it, and I still question it. By the way, I was arguing with Charles Clayton and some other people last night on Facebook about this very issue. And I may have indicated that I didn't think that racial incidents happened at the high school level in the state of Iowa. I know better. I know better. Okay. That's, I didn't mean to give that impression to anyone. It would be a stupid thing even to say. I would be very disappointed if in 2020, the year 2020, that our young people don't know any better than that. And if it turns out that this incident as described in a social media post is correct, we need corrective action. Of course, I'm very wary of a Juicy Smollett situation. And again, I don't know if this allegation is true or not. As we sit here this afternoon, this is an allegation that something happened on Friday night at a football game. And again, I'm well aware that in high school football games, unfortunately, these things can occur. But let's say this, I don't know if this allegation in this particular case is true. But again, when I saw this, and when I've seen other things and heard other things like this, I do think of Jussie Smollett. He was that black actor in Chicago. He's also gay, who apparently went out at 2:00 in the morning in the freezing cold night of Chicago to get a Subway sandwich. And he claimed that some white rednecks talking about Trump rules or something. I can't remember. I should probably look it up before I get on the air and start talking about it. But I'm sure you remember the incident. Yeah, and they put a noose around his neck, and it was just terrible, and on and on and on. And everybody went crazy. I mean, celebrities, politicians, they were condemning this as, this is an indication of Trump. Oh, these lower class, inferior, moron white people, see, if you let them have an inch, they'll take a mile, and we're just not going to let them have an inch because they're bad and we're good, and we're the white people around here, not them. The whole class prejudice thing. Well, of course, it turned out that this actor, Smollett, hired a couple of African-American guys to put a couple of licks on him and make it look like he had been attacked. The whole thing was nonsense. And, of course, the Chicago district attorney dismissed the case against Smollett and his co-conspirators in the interest of justice, I guess. Well, the feds are still looking at this. And the feds, I suppose, are hesitant because most of the people involved, the Chicago district attorney, the mayor, are black people. And they'll start, those folks will start screaming racist to make it about race so they can get off the hook for their wrongdoing. Now, white people can't do that because if white people start talking about being oppressed because of racism, everybody laughs, and I don't blame them. I was a poor white kid, and I still had it better than black kids. I did, I didn't have to worry about somebody calling me racial names. There was a few times in life when I got cornered for being a Catholic or kicked out of somebody's yard or house for being a Catholic. I mean, when I was a kid in the 50s, it was a much more racist country. We have taken huge strides. We have changed as a people. But the narrative sometimes is this is the way our country has always been. It's a rotten country. We're rotten people. We don't deserve anything that we have. And we should just shut up. And if we protest, well, we need to be kicked off this board or thrown out of here. That's just not justice. That's not justice. It's not fair to anybody. And for a political party like the Democrats to embrace that, so white people can take care of the money. Don't kid yourself. Don't kid yourself. This is all about wealthy white people funding both parties that want to make sure the money and power stays in their hands. Don't think it's any different. I don't care how many white women get out in the streets with black activists and start screaming Black Lives Matter. That's what the deal is. No, I'm not cynical. I'm being a hard-eyed realist. Listen, if Joe Biden beats Donald Trump a year from now, your life isn't going to be any better. It might be worse. You got me? I'm not saying Trump is any prize. He's not. He's obnoxious. He probably is a little racist. He doesn't care about anybody. All those things are true. But I will question the integrity and the sincerity of Joe Biden and the Democrats. Biden might even actually care. He's an old enough man to still have some empathy. And the life he went through, might compel him to understand pain and suffering more than some others. I don't doubt that. But Biden's not in charge of that party. Biden is not in charge of that party. The people who are in charge of the party are making sure that the fires burn in Portland and around the country. No, that's not an exaggeration. No. This is like a fight. This is like gang warfare, two gangs going at it all the time. You know? That's what it sounds like and looks like to me. And we're just waiting around for a new boss who's going to be, yes, same as the old boss. Are you really going to vote for Joe Biden because he's got better manners than Trump? Is that the only reason? You might want to take a look at Smoking Joe's resume first. By the way, if anybody has any information on the validity of this racial case that happened at a Friday night football game between Southeast Valley and Calhoun County, my number here at the radio station is 515-955-5656, extension 141. 955-5656, extension 141. Again, I may have to have Charles Clayton in to explain himself as to how he can be a leader, and being a leader doesn't make him a politician, because he's beyond, I don't know if he's beyond politics or what the hell he's trying to say. I don't understand everything Charles says. And I'll tell you frankly, I think there's a lot of things that Charles and I could talk about, but they're as a black person, he's going to see things differently. I don't doubt that at all. And that's why we need to keep talking about these things. And I have no problem talking about my life experiences, how I think, and who I am. I'm not going to take a back seat to some screaming liberal who claims to have the answer if we'd all start listening to her. All they want to do is scream and defame. And most of all, they're opposed to free speech, of course. That's one thing you better watch for if and when the Democrats take power again. You will not be able to speak and act as you once did. Back in the 50s, I'll tell you, when I was a kid, people paid no attention to the government. And the government, it wouldn't even occurred to politicians then to start getting people to conform to some scenario contrived by a liberal sociologist. That we're going to reimagine the world, and this is the way you're going to start thinking and talking and dressing. And then we're going to take your children into schools that we control, and tell them that they're bad people because they're white. And white people, of course, oppressed others. It's not just that Caucasians won the battle of history, because that's the real story. Read world history. It was every corner of the globe was a war. There was a warrior culture that ruled by force, according to their God, according to their belief. And that's the way it'll be in the future. We just dress things up with this political thing to fool ourselves. To fool ourselves. There will be force in the future. God, did you see how fast they killed smoking in Iowa? That was all about some upper middle class people who decided they didn't like smoking in public areas. The only people who did were working class people. They did a little survey, and they thought working class people have no political power. We're just going to stop them from doing this. We're going to go on to private property, into where there's private property, and tell that person that you can no longer allow a legal product on your private property. That came directly from Mike Gronstall, who, thank God, is no longer in the Senate. Because he didn't care what people thought. He didn't care. He was contemptuous of what you think and what I think. Our lives didn't matter to him. He knew best.
Michael Devine, the mayor of Manville.
It's a fancy title for a part-time job.
money when Walter Mondale, who at the time was known as a very conservative politician, nominated Geraldine Ferraro to be his vice presidential pick. I was all over the place back then. I was in radio then. Oh, there's no way that Mondale is going to pick a woman or he's going to pick a safe candidate, and that's it. Well, he picked Geraldine. He still lost, of course. He ran against Reagan, who
he only won one state, I think, didn't he? Against
Minnesota, yeah.
yeah, his home state.
His home state. He even lost Washington, D.C., which is a rare feat for a Democrat, because Washington, D.C., with all those public workers and everything, they're gonna vote Democratic almost every time. Jim Kirsten's our guest. Of course, he's out at Iowa Central. What's going on at Iowa Central, Jim?
Well, we're just beginning to finish, or I guess we're finishing the move to the new Greehey Student Success Center. Bill Greehey donated $4 million to the college over 2 or 3 years ago, and we built a new student one-stop support center, and we're just finished transitioning over the weekend, and so that's getting organized. And then at some point, when COVID allows it, and it makes it more community safe, we will have an open house and let the community come in and look at it. But it's a really impressive building.
Oh, I bet it is. I mean, Iowa Central, since I was there, I don't even recognize the place.
Oh, it's transformed since the years of Bob Paxton. He had a vision that started the process, and then with Dr. Kenny and our board, led by Mark Crimmins, it really has. It's been a real jewel in the Midwest, and we're very proud of it. And hopefully, we have a lot more to do.
Who was the president of the college when I was there? He was originally a high school principal.
Barber?
Yeah, Barber.
Yeah.
Barber was there. He had been a high school principal in Eagle Grove, and he came over here, and he was an old school guy. I mean, he wore suits every day to work, and and the staff around him did the same. Gray suits with dark blue ties. You know how it was.
Conservative academic leader. And
very conservative, yeah.
Then we had Jack Bottenfield, and that's when Tom Kriegel was the chairman of the board. And then Tom retired, and Mark Crimmins got elected by the public, and Bottenfield left to become president out in Wyoming somewhere. And then we were able to hire Bob Paxton years before I was involved with the college. But I was working with Bob a lot from the private sector. We helped set up a business center downtown for the college at the Trolley Center, and just really had a really tight relationship with Iowa Central. In fact, I thought of this driving out here the other day, that where the state patrol used to have their building at the entrance of our college drive.
Right.
I was in the Senate at the time, and we got funding to build the new state patrol building out on Highway 20. And I remember talking to Norm Mundy, who was the Democrat state rep from Fort Dodge. We were able to get the state to agree to give that property and building to the college. So the college got that property in that key corner for no cost. And that was, again, good bipartisan support of Norm and myself and our leadership. So
Norm was
college, that's kind of I forgot completely about that. But that kind of began the process with Bob Paxton, that he saw a vision to make this college a little mini university campus. And now we have, I think, 16 dorms on campus and 1,200 kids living on. So it's really a great institution.
Norm was a farmer from Calhoun County, wasn't he?
No, he was just south of Fort Dodge along New 20. Yeah.
Okay.
And his sons, I think, still farm there. And I remember one of the issues that Norm and I very strongly disagreed on was the bike law, or the high helmet law.
Oh, yeah, he fought that. He
was an adamant supporter because one of his children had been injured with a head injury in a bike accident, and felt terrible about it. But it went back to the individual liberty, and when does government draw the line? And we were able to stop that mandate in Iowa, and then the next year Congress repealed the mandate. So Iowa kind of helped lead that effort, because we found in Iowa there were the top 10 reasons for head injuries. I think motorcycle accidents were number 7. Falling downstairs, riding a bike, or riding a horse were like 1, 2, 3. So we would say, if you're going to make motorcyclists ride, why don't you make horseback riders? And anyway, we were able to kill it. And that was, again, on a bipartisan basis.
Well, you couldn't help but like Mr. Mundy. I mean,
great guy.
I believe he's passed away, hasn't he?
Yes, I think he has. And he was on the Webster County Supervisors as well, and did a very good job there.
Yeah. I remember that fight about the helmet law. I was adamantly opposed to his helmet law, and I understood exactly. I was a parent myself by that time. I understood exactly what he was talking about, but I didn't think that was the type of path to go down. And I don't even ride a motorcycle.
I don't either. I don't. But that was me of the individual liberty of, if a biker wants to, they should wear a helmet. But if they choose not to, if you're going to make them wear a helmet, make everybody else in the top 10 list wear them as well. And general public saw that it just didn't make sense.
That's why I'm not a Democrat, Jim. The Democrats can't help but say, well, let's reason, and here's what you should do. But you're free to do whatever you want. And we, the people, will say, okay, we'll do what we want. And they say, no.
Yeah.
On second thought, they'll treat you like children, and they still want to do that. And so,
well, not all Democrats, but some do. And again, I have really lucky relationships. In fact, Senator Beal and I have been approached this week because evidently there's been some damage done and stolen signs for both parties, candidates for president and U.S. Senate. And it's just, it's probably young kids out goofing off, but we just can't allow that. So we're going to write a letter to the editor asking people to please be civil and leave people's property alone, because they're breaking the law when they go in and take a political sign or trespass in someone's yard. So I think Daryl and I were able to agree that let's just send out a positive message and try to stop it so these kids realize they're ruining a person's right to show who they support.
Well, nobody stole any of my signs. Of course, nobody wants to be in my neighborhood after dark, believe me. So,
well, 4 years ago, some kids were stealing them. Well, I ended up catching them, and they ended up being friends of my son. So they were just trying to play a joke on me and him.
Yeah, sure. Well, Daryl Beal was old school. He was a Democrat, and but that didn't engulf his entire personality. He was way before Cory Booker told people to start yelling in Trump supporters' faces.
Daryl was a gentleman and still
is, and Helen Miller was a fine person and a great representative. It's not like we haven't had that.
No, luckily in Webster County, we are blessed. We have good, Mayor Matt Bembrick's a Democrat, works very well with whoever's in office, bipartisan wise, and so does Mark Campbell and the supervisors. So, people can have their own philosophy, but at the end of the day, we got to get together to agree. And I think we're blessed our region has that kind of leadership.
Well, I saw Mark Campbell out at the Republican Party thing here a month or so ago down at the Orchard, and I was so surprised. I said very loudly, "Mark, what are you doing here?" Like he had no right to be there.
No, well, he was there because, again, he crossed his lines, and Ann Meyer worked closely with him on the mental health issue.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to say, party line's one thing, but when you do what's right and you're doing your job, I'll be there to support you. And he's done that. And I admire him, and I admire Ann Meyer as well.
Oh, I wouldn't have any problem supporting Bemrick or Campbell if they sought higher office. If you remember, not this last nomination process, of course, but there were those who believed Matt Bemrick should run against Steve King. I don't know, it was a couple years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and I asked him about it, and he said no.
Yeah. Well, he actually got along with Steve King. They differ again philosophically, but I think they, enjoyed discussing and arguing about politics. But at that last year, I think Steve got, unfortunately, got kind of put in a box with some of the, things he was saying that finally caught up with him.
Well, I got him on the air and I asked him, "What are you doing talking to the New York Times like that? They're not fans. They're going to jump all over you." And they did. And they pretty much drove him out of office.
Yep.
I mean, he didn't. He was a very conservative guy. He was very. He was hardly a shallow, superficial thinker. He was not.
Oh no, he knew where he stood.
Yes, and he had very deeply religious and intellectual reasons for believing as he did. I had total respect for that.
He does, but again, sometimes you just keep your mouth shut and believe what you believe. But he did. He served well. But I think it was just time for him to move on, and I think he's going to find something really exciting in the next venture of his life. So we'll see what happens.
Well, that's right. I've tried to get him on the air since the nomination process, and I haven't heard back from him. So maybe he's licking his wound somewhere or whatever he's doing. But
somebody told me he's writing a book, so he might be.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and I have not talked to him either since the election. But anyway, so I think it'll be interesting here tonight too. The president's going to be debating Mr. Biden at 8 o'clock, I believe, Central Time, and so I hope to be able to watch that or at least tape it.
I question Randy Feenstra's decision not to debate J.D. Scholten on Iowa Public Television.
Yeah, I have not talked to him or his advisors. I don't know if they don't want to give him a platform, to share a platform. I don't know. So that's a strategy or strategic decision they made, and we'll have to wait and see if he does talk to the paper about it, or you maybe have him on the radio and ask him.
Oh, I've been meaning to get a hold of him, but I haven't. I have his press secretary's phone number here somewhere, but I just haven't. There've been too many other things going on, I guess, or maybe I'm making excuses. But
no, maybe do it early next week after Schouten's on Friday night, and kind of see, why weren't you there at the forum, and what. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he says.
Yeah, I like Randy. I really do. I like Randy. He's a good guy. But if he starts talking about getting rid of Social Security or Medicare, I'm not on his side.
Yeah, I don't think he is.
I know there are Republicans who want to do that. I think that's going to hurt Joni Ernst quite a bit. She can be susceptible to that accusation. And Iowa, with its percentage of older people, it's not the place to take that position. You've been a political operative probably longer than I have, but
it's common sense. But I think I saw a Joni interview, maybe it was last night at the debate, where she said, I am not going to destroy Social Security. My parents both rely on it, and that's the same thing when people were, insinuating Governor Reynolds was going to get rid of IPERS, and she said, absolutely not. My husband and I, contributed our entire careers in diapers. We were going to do our best to preserve it. So yeah. Unfortunately, for political purposes, people destroy or they try to kind of expand on rumors that may or may not have any basis.
Yeah, I didn't know. The teachers union went crazy there for a while. They really thought that Governor Reynolds was going to do away with IPERS.
And she's not.
No, I would ask Republicans, are you guys, doing this? I mean, I'd take them off to the side. Do you have any plans, or what are you hearing down there? None of them had any idea what these people were talking about.
I think at one point Governor Branstad, when he came back, was looking at keeping all the IPERS, beneficiaries whole and fully paid with the current system, and then winnow it off into a defined contribution where you chip in like you do now, but you aren't guaranteed so much a month. You're going to get whatever it is you've earned, kind of like a 401k. But that had no legs and it's gone nowhere. And I think those were some of those rumors may have started. But you have the full commitment, I know, of Governor Reynolds to preserve IPERS as is, and I think the legislature is the same way. They have to maybe look at how they can fund it better. So I think because of the economy, they've had some losses.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that came from. It blew up. It burned hot for a little while, and then it was over. I don't.
Well, I think it was during that whole collective bargaining. People were all emotional and worried their lives are going to be destroyed by the changes. And here at Iowa Central, we have not had any disruption. We have a great partnership with our collective bargaining unit, and it's worked. You just have to be responsible adults and work together to resolve an agreement.
Well, I think that happened too, right?
Yeah, it did. We're lucky. We have really good relationships, and Dr. Kinney and the union leaders here really should be commended for that.
All right, Jim Kirsten's our guest. Jim, of course, a longtime Republican, and now at Iowa Central, has been for many years. Why do you think Ambassador Branstad decided to give up his post and come home?
Well, I think he's 73 now, maybe 74, and I think he just says, you know what, it's time for me to come back. And he loves the public arena and being involved, so I see him coming back and still being involved, but a much lower profile, maybe more behind the scenes.
Okay.
But no, I think his wife, I think, wanted to come back and be closer to their grandkids. The one daughter was able to move her family to Beijing, but after COVID, they all were told to come back. So I think he just wanted to be closer to his family, and my understanding is they're building a house in Johnston, Iowa, along with the house they have in Lake Panorama. So they're pretty well settled in Iowa.
Gosh, is he that old? 73 years old? Gosh,
I think so.
I think you're right. Jim Kirsten's been our guest. Thank you, Jim.
Yep, thanks for having me.
All right, this is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge.
I'm Mary Oliver. I live in Ankeny, Iowa. I've paid into Social Security with every paycheck. We depend on it. So it's absolutely frightening when Senator Ernst talks about gutting Social Security behind closed doors.
I have talked about privatizing Social Security.
Joni Ernst looks out for Wall Street. She would put our retirement at risk. I am extremely disappointed in Joni Ernst. She's just not for us. Teresa Greenfield is tough enough to stand up for people like me. She would not back down.
I'm Teresa Greenfield. Social Security is something we've all earned after a lifetime of hard work. So when I see Washington politicians take millions from Wall Street and then threaten to privatize and cut Social Security, I say no way.
You can walk anytime and enjoy its many health benefits. So team up and join us October. Walk is presented by Delta Dental of Iowa.
During this challenging and unprecedented time, Gunderson's is here to serve with expert guidance and understanding to each family and their unique needs. We provide options for funeral, cremation, memorial, virtual, and webcast services, either presently or at a later date. We understand that grief does not wait. We are trained to help you walk this path to bring comfort and support. Every life deserves to be recognized and celebrated, whether it be together or afar.
Michael Devine, broadcasting live.
That's right, broadcasting live. I'm not gone yet, so I'm still broadcasting live here at AM 1400 KVFT. Of course, you can get audio and video of what's happening in the studio today, as you can every day by going to my Facebook page, AM 1400 KVFT, the voice of Fort Dodge, or Alpha Media Fort Dodge, our website. And it's even on my personal Facebook page, I think, Michael Devine. But any way you'd like to get it. By the way, yes, if you do go there, you'll find David Feerick, who's, I don't see any visible bruises on you today, David, but I'm sure they're there for disagreeing with Lori about Crawford Park.
You were supposed to say the ruggedly handsome.
I beg your pardon. The ruggedly handsome, fiercely attractive.
The farther I get away from the camera, the better I look.
Me too. Usually if I'm in Humboldt, it looks a lot better, and the camera stays down here. So you got this job done, and you weren't beaten, or you have a beating coming?
A beating.
Well, Lori,
we gave up on beatings about 9 months ago.
Really?
It's against our personnel policy now.
Wow. I'm surprised about that. Does Bemrick know about this? Because I think he's still beating people. No. So what happens now that you have this crossing down at Crawford Park? I don't know what the big deal was, but why was Lori so opposed anyway?
Well, I mean, let's clarify that. So there has been a really lengthy planning process on what to do in Snell Crawford Park. The last plan was done in '96, which makes it roughly 24 years old. And, about every 20 years, you got to think about updating plans and, what have you accomplished in the last 20 years and what do you see in the next 20 years for the use and development in the park. So that started a long time ago. I want to say at least a couple of years ago, and involves stakeholders and different people with the park. And so the planning process really culminated last night in the decision by the council on adopting the master plan, the new master plan for Snell Crawford Park. There was basically one debatable item on it, and that is, do we maintain those low water crossings, the fords or whatever they're called? There's one that's pretty much gone, because it used to be, we've talked about this before, you'd be able to drive all the way through the park and up to Williams Drive, or up to 15th Street, and from Williams up to 15th Street and do that. That hasn't been open in, I don't know, 20 years or more years.
Quite a long time. As a matter of fact, the last mayor that tried to get that done was Gail Van Alstine.
So up until several years ago, there was a drive that goes to crosses the westernmost ford, and then there's a little parking lot turnaround, and then people could park around and then go back and forth over.
Sure, yeah.
And then when we took out, we had to take it out initially for when we did the construction. We built that hillside up, basically destroyed the old road, and then we were debating whether we put it back in or not. We put it in, but then we just never opened up the crossing side of it. Really, it's not the kind of safe environment you ought to have in a park, because you don't really have a good pedestrian walkway through there. You have the bike trail, which is up a little bit of ways, and then you have the road. And the road, the way it's configured now, isn't really configured with a whole lot of traffic calming, which is kind of a euphemism for trying to find ways to slow cars down. So it isn't a good situation to have the pedestrians on that road. And then you get down to the water, and which is something that kids love to play in down there, because it flows, okay, but it's shallow and safe. Yeah. And kids love playing it, especially that ford, because you could just take your shoes off and walk back and forth in the water. Kids love to do it. My kids are little, they love to do it. and it's just not it's not really configured to be, I don't think, to be a safe environment to have both cars and kids on there at once. And so we've left it closed, and knowing that what's coming is this master plan, and say, hey, what are we going to do long term with this thing? Are we going to have, if we're going to have a Ford crossing, that's fine, but let's plan it in a manner that we have separated cars from kids, and there's really cool areas for kids to play in the water, and then there's a crossing that, and the road leading to and from that is designed such that people can't go at excessive speeds.
Yeah, well, I would be opposed to having cars drive into places where there's already kids. I mean, nobody wants that, do they?
That's what you had when it was open.
Okay.
Because the kids would go down there and play on that slab of concrete. Because next to it, you didn't have any like decent sort of other hard surfaces. So it was a slab of concrete, and then it was a muddy creek bottom, or there's kind of more jagged rocks. So what we're going to do with this plan is we'll maintain a slab of concrete. We'll change the road going to it. Again, this plan meaning what the council approved last night. We open the Ford, but we'll have a road going to it that is a little bit more windy, so you can't get up a lot of speed, and probably even speed bumps to it. There will be a separate sidewalk that'll get kids down to that area. And then we'll put nice big, probably flat rock, like flat limestone, kind of at that same elevation the Ford is, that they could probably walk back and forth. So that's something they could play in. That'll be cool, but it won't be hopefully not as cool as the Ford. So they're not attracted to that. Because sometimes these kids aren't with parents. So we got to create a built environment that pulls them away from areas where they could get harmed. Like,
we don't want that. We just want to park. Come on, man. That's what we want.
I know. That's what I want.
There's no chance of the road from 15th Street down to the park being reopened
as a road.
Yeah.
No.
Nobody's behind that. Why is that?
I just don't think anyone's.
Well, the reasons given 20 years ago or more, when I'm sure Gail Van Alstine was the mayor. Well, I guess Gail's been, it was longer than that ago, but the reasons were given by some of the local residents that there were going to be drug deals down that road. And the truth be told is that there were some people down there with nicer houses that didn't want cars going down there. It was all for their preference and their pleasure, in other words. And that was unfair to the rest of us. However, there were enough votes on the council to kill the idea. And that was the only reason, really. So do we have a better reason now to keep that road closed?
Well, the reason I would argue is it's not really a good road. I mean, we paved it.
There would have to be
a decent bike path.
Yeah.
But it's pretty steep.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't meet any standards we would build roads today. Now, a park road could be a little different. I mean, I personally prefer it as a bike path and a pedestrian access down to the park than the drive-through it was.
Do you really think there's pedestrians going down from 15th Street?
Yeah, I think yeah, bikes go down there quite a bit. I think people walk down there.
All right, let's go to the phones here real quickly. Good afternoon. You're on the air at KVFD with David Feerick.
Hi, it's real simple. They don't need a road there. There's no need for it. Thank you.
So there you go, Mike.
Well, there we go. Why didn't I think of that? Oh, I get that a lot. Well, it's real simple. You just don't do it.
It's hard to argue with that logic. You just don't need it. I try to use that with my kids all the time.
It doesn't work, does it?
Can I buy that? No, you don't need it.
Yes, Dad, I do. Give it to
me. I need it. I'm going to die without it.
How is the? I got to digress. I'm hoping that the University of Iowa will get their head out of their collective pockets and start their swim team again. Yeah. I know there is an effort by parents of swim team members, of which you are one, to get that program opened up again. Are you part of that effort, or where is that effort going? Do you know?
And maybe I should preface this with a small print. Any comments from here on out are the comments of David Feerick, swim dad, and not necessarily city manager representing the
That's a good idea.
So yes, I am part of the effort to try to bring back the swim program, and I think it's a strong effort, but it has a couple really stubborn barriers, and that being President Harold and AD Barta, that I just don't think they have the openness. I hope I'm wrong, to consider options. Where there's a very, very intelligent. One of the interesting things that it's new to me to be part of a swim family, because I wasn't a swimmer. I was a football player, wrestler, and
right.
And as I started, there are a lot of really smart swim alumni, and really, really smart and really successful business people that are putting their minds to how do we save this program, how do we structure not just swimming but Olympic programs, which Olympic in the NCAA terms is a euphemism for programs that don't make revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you structure those that they can exist and continue at an NCAA level, but not be reliant on football revenue and basketball revenue? Because, I think COVID-19 taught us that revenue isn't a guarantee year in, year out, but the whole model of all these sports relying on that football, basketball revenue, that may not be here forever, because we don't know what there's going to be, though. I mean, sometime these colleges may have to start paying these players to keep them. The NCAA is in a whole lot farther away from having to do something different to have these athletes continuing to participate in NCAA athletics versus going straight to pro.
Yeah.
So it's a model that needs to be looked at, that has alternate funding sources, is more like its own kind of entity and organization that kind of relies on itself for revenue. And I think there's a great opportunity to do that. It's going to take a lot of work and some open minds with people that are used to doing it the way it's been done for 20 years.
Well, that's the problem with having Harold as your president, because he came out of the private sector and he's used to his word being obeyed without question, and of course I've never been much of a fan of Gary Barta's a nice guy, but he hasn't blown me away with his work as athletic director there at the University of Iowa. I mean, still waiting for any kind of to get anywhere near a national championship in football seems to be just something we talk about.
Yeah, Iowa's got an uphill battle, even with the money spent. They're obviously they're behind Ohio State on what they spend on money. They're behind the Michigan,
way behind,
and it's just the nature of the program, probably the nature of the population, and the alumni base just isn't there to generate the same kind of revenue to support it.
Well, sooner or later, that is what I hear from Hawkeye fans. Well, look at what Kirk's done, and he was in the Rose Bowl. Yeah, we got killed. Stanford just stomped on us. They had
that was a bad day.
And they had a dancing cow out in midfield.
Yeah, and then they go mock Iowa at halftime.
Yeah, that's what they did. Yeah, they had this dancing cow out in.
I remember the Stanford band was playing, and the announcers were like speechless.
and they're a raucous group out there.
And then I think they just cut them off. It's like they wouldn't talk. Like announcers would typically talk about the marching band and say nice things, and then Stanford was out there, and it was just like silence.
Well, they were a wild group. The band came out, they had feathers in their helmets, and the drummers were all over the place drumming differently.
They're like the opposite of a traditional marching band.
They really are, but they seem to be having great fun. We weren't, but anyway, sooner or later we get down to that. Even the most hardcore Hawkeye fan and Ferentz fan will tell me we just don't have the population, and we just don't have the money to allow us to compete at the national level with Ohio State. Somehow does. They have a much higher population, or much bigger population in Ohio, I'm sure, than we do here. But whatever happened to Illinois either? They used to be a halfway decent football team, but man, they haven't been for years.
Yeah, I know. And I grew up in Champaign. I was a huge Illini fan for most of my life. I think the University of Illinois kind of gave up on sports, or they gave up on being good.
Really?
I don't know. It just seemed like their culture changed. And again, I'm stating that from a position of ignorance, because as I grew up and kind of moved away from Champaign, I kind of moved out of that knowledge base of what's being talked about. But it just seemed from my vantage point that they didn't care about being super successful. I mean, it used to be Illinois, especially on the basketball side, had had a coach that was there for 30 years. They had a great assistant that would recruit really effectively out of Chicago. Both of those individuals left. They actually for a while had a pretty couple good coaches going through there, but then didn't stay. And then they just seemed like they didn't really make a heck of an effort to recruit and to really spend time working the Chicago markets. And the football teams always struggle to recruit out of Chicago when they got to compete with Michigan and Notre Dame.
Yeah, well, Michigan, thankfully, is not the Michigan of old. I mean, Jim Harbaugh went there, and the Michigan fans all acted like it was the second coming, and he's a decent coach. But no, it just hasn't worked out. And of course, John got beat up last night with the Baltimore Ravens. Patrick Mahomes was ridiculous.
Oh,
he was.
Yeah, I'm a Bears fan, and I'm sitting there watching that game, and I'm like, and the Bears drafted Mitch Trubisky ahead of this guy. Not that Mitch is horrible, but that guy, Mahomes is unbelievable.
Mahomes is unbelievable. He's just completely unbelievable. He is. And he's such a talented guy. I mean, he's an acrobat. He can run. He can shove off tacklers. And
what was really neat watching the game last night with no fans in the stands is you got to hear the cadence a lot more. You got to hear what you felt like more part of the actual game.
Yeah,
because there wasn't that whole sort of back noise, and and so I really, this is pretty much the first NFL game that I actually sat and watched. Once our council meeting was over, I went home and put that on, and it was pretty neat.
So we did talk a little bit on the council meeting last night about Exposition Park.
Yeah,
and there's going to be an education loop through there. Is that right? What do we mean by that?
Oh, what it'll be is for lack, there's a better term for it, but one I call just small signs that can be different things to help educate kids. What we're going to talk about, some of the plant species that are in the park or other things, and it could be interchanged for different types of educational thing, an art educational thing. It could be a music educational thing, but one of the plans is to have a nice walking loop through there, to have art pieces in there, to create but it's a different kind of space. It's not a program kind of space. There's not going to be Frisbee golf. There's not going to be, baseball fields. It's basically going to be a kind of I would call a quiet, just natural park where people can go hang out. I mean, there'll be places where people, tables where people can go enjoy a meal, or green spaces where they could lay out a blanket and bring food and let their kids play, and other things. But it won't have like big pieces of playground equipment like you see in our other larger parks.
There was a time when Fort Dodge was known for being anything but peaceful. This was a wild, fun town at one time. I got to tell you.
I get all nostalgic on you now.
I always get nostalgic. Yeah. When there's more behind you than there is in front of you, you sometimes get nostalgic. Is there anything else we need to know?
No, other than there is some rumors that we'll be like canceling Halloween, and we are not canceling trick-or-treating, Beggars Night, whatever it's called.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That is a community function. The city, it's not a city function. It's not a city program. What the city does is say, okay, it's 5:30 to 7:30, and that's really just to coordinate people, just to get the message out that, hey, if you're going to do it, do them between the times. But really, it's not, nor do we, one is, it's not necessarily a city function. Two, the city manager does not have the authority to tell someone they can't go to their neighbor's house.
Well, that's good news.
I mean, there's nothing I can do to say, hey, you can't go to your neighbor's house and ask for candy and wear a costume or anything like that. So,
that's good news.
So there's no plans to like cancel
Halloween,
trick or treat Halloween, Beggars Night. Now we might send out some CDC guidelines on safer ways to hand out candy or things like that. I mean, there's some stuff that's starting to come out from the CDC, and if we can get it put together and explained, we'll do that. But I mean, we're not, that's really not it's not the city's thing as far as a government organization. It's a community thing. It's been that way for how many hundreds of years?
I don't know, long time. I keep, for some reason, a scene from a movie popped into my head, and it was Alan Rickman played the bad guy. He played the king or the sheriff of Nottingham.
Yeah, he played Sheriff of Nottingham in one of the whatever.
And he was just throwing a fit about something. He goes, and cancel Christmas. And cancel Christmas. It was great. He did it perfectly.
Yeah.
All right, David Farragut has been our guest. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Michael Devine, the mayor of Manville.
It's a fancy title for a part-time job.
Michael Devine at AM 1400 KVFD.
It's 4:31. News is coming up.
School goes on.
And Staples has everything your student needs to learn from anywhere.
Notebooks to sanitizer, laptops to project boards.
And all at a